Hey, welcome to Talking 360. I'm Tony Scott, and with me is Lena Johnson, JolenaJohnson.com. Jolena is author, writing services expert, platform, book construction, book consultation, publishing, coaching, training, speaking. She does it all. But we're talking about publishing your book, your first book. Everybody has a book in them. It's whether or not you want to get it published or not. But I belong to quite a few young author book forums and stuff like that. There's a lot of people whose dream is to be an author, and they don't do it for the money. They do it because they love books. So, Jolena, how you been?
I've been great, Tony. What about you?
You know what? I'm doing good. I'm blessed. I'm good. I'm doing this. I'm excited to help people about it, and I want to talk about our next segment in our series of getting your book published. Let's get to it. This one is advantages and expectations when working with a publisher. So if you are going to work with a publisher, you can't just think that they're going to just hand over all their resources to you so you can get your book published, and then when you get your book published that you owe them nothing. It doesn't work that way. Even when recording artists, record companies will front them the money for a video, but when that album starts moving copies, before they see a dime, the record company gets their money back. Mm-hmm. That's why a lot of young artists, they go on the road because that's their money. That's how they make their money. So in a situation with a publisher, Jolena, who does what?
Well, basically you have traditional publishing arrangements where the author writes the book and they write it to the very best of their ability, and they get an agent, and then the agent tries to sell it to a large publishing company. And that had been going on for many, many, many years. That publishing model started changing because people started self-publishing their books, and it's difficult to get an agent, let alone get a publisher. And so what happens is when you have a traditional publisher, it can take maybe 2 to 3 years from the time you wrote the book for it to actually come out. And it really depends on what your subject matter is. So people have taken it into their own hands and said, okay, well, I would like to have a publisher, but I also want my book to come out quicker. So small publishing companies, kind of like myself, have come out, and we offer unique models for publishing. But I can tell you a little bit about what I do, which is very unique, because I actually help people to write their books. I help people to educate them about what to expect, and I sometimes publish their books, okay? But traditional publishers, especially in this day and age, they are going to get their money, okay? So they're going to either get their money up front, or they're going to get their money in the back end, or they're going to act like a printing company, which is just you give them whatever it is, they simply print it, and then that's it. And a lot of authors are getting caught up in that. There's this one site, I don't remember the name of it, and I'm not going to call it, but it's like freesomething.com, something like that. So I think I'm almost giving it away. But basically, you can turn in your book as if it's already done, and they're literally going to print the pages the way they are. You don't want that, okay? And then they're going to have the rights to it, and if you want it to be changed or edited or any of those things, then first of all, your best foot is not forward, and it's going to take an awful lot for you to get that done, and you're going to end up paying. So I want people to realize the best thing you can do is do the very best you know how and get it as put together as you can, following all the steps we've got to at this point. And the publisher is basically there to raise awareness. They're basically there to make sure you have your ISBN number, you have your barcode, that the format is formatted well in the interior design and the cover design, and they will represent you in terms of making sure that your book is distributed. That's the publisher's job. Okay, and so they will either charge you, let's say if your book costs $10, they'll either charge you and you buy the books from them, and you may pay $10 a book. If you didn't pay anything up front, you may pay $10 a book per book, and then that extra $5 is yours. Or like my model, I have people pay a lot less per book, but I have them pay for the actual process. Okay, so in the process, they're actually paying for their services and things like that. So they're able to actually recoup more on their particular book. But it is not the publisher's job to publicize you. Okay, that's not really your job. 95% of the time, it is the author, and you're going to have to be grinding. Okay, so even though the publisher, they may have a launch party for you, that's not necessarily their job to pay for it. It depends on what your deal is. So they may be present. I always try to be present in all of my authors' events. But after that, I may or may not appear and those type things. And a lot of times you're never going to meet the publisher. I'm just a little bit more hands-on. So just understand, the publisher is there to make sure your elements are in place, to make sure the book is a reflection of you and them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go to and I'm not calling out Kinko's and Office Depot, I'm just going to say, you know, if you go to a copy place, like a Office Depot,
A print shop.
yeah, you're going to get what you gave them. So if it's not good quality, they're not going to change it.
Mm-hmm.
A good publisher is going to look at your materials and say, this is great, and these are some changes we recommend, and they're going to either do them themselves and charge you for it, or you're going to do them, and then you're going to come back and bring it. But you have to expect to pay money for that.
Unless you're like J.K. Rowling, because that's a whole nother level.
Well, that's kind of like the traditional publishing model, which I said before.
Mm-hmm.
And so some people are taking the route where they do the book, they're making it an ebook, and they're getting some exposure. And if the content is good and you have the right connections, and a lot of it's about connections, and you can get a traditional publisher interested in it, then they may come back and say, hey, can we buy the rights to your book and pay you X number of thousands of dollars for it? And we may change the cover, we may change the content, but we want your book. Okay. So you know, there are people who have done that. I haven't done it, but there are people who that happens to rarely.
Where is the profit in books, and where is the profit not in books?
You can't go into the book expecting to make a profit, period. That's it. Your book may cost you anywhere, even if you do it yourself, it may cost you anywhere from, let's say, $500 because you bought your, you know, the elements you need and you got it designed, and it could cost you $50,000. And I'm not kidding, $5,000 to $50,000. Okay, so as I mentioned, let's say your book costs $15. Let's say you're able to buy it wholesale for $5. You get $10 per book. But if you already invested $2,000 in the book, you have to sell at least $200 to even break even. And then over and above that, that may be profit. And then if you're counting your time or other things, you may not have any. So the profit is really in creating a platform for your book and perhaps getting some speaking engagements where people will pay for you to do that. If you're an expert in your field and people want to hear what you have to say, if you're educating people and you can offer consulting services, you know, it just really depends on who you are. But it needs to be in the reason you wrote the book in the first place. And if you do make a profit with your book, you're very lucky. These days, if you sell 500 copies of your books, you are doing outstanding. You're like in the top 10%.
So if you sell 500 copies of your book, will that get publishers' attention?
Not necessarily, because they don't know. You ordered them. I mean, if you self-published them, I mean, how will it get their attention if they don't know?
Right.
Really, it is. It's a matter of connections. It's very difficult. It just is. And I think you need to find who your audience is. And if you can garner your audience support, that's going to be your best bet. So even if it's starting a Facebook page and I mean, I just advocate it. It works. And, you know, having a YouTube link, if you are good on video. If you're not very engaging, don't do it. You know, people don't want to look at something real boring.
Right.
But I would say the money is not necessarily in the books, it's in the activity in which the books facilitate.
Okay.
And sometimes it's just because you are more credible. So now, you know, if you're already speaking to people, hey, anybody who's a speaker and they're getting audiences who have cash in their pockets, as long as they're not teenagers. Well, teenagers do have money sometimes too. But you know what I mean? If they have cash in their pockets and you're meeting people every day, and you're a realtor, I think realtors are great. They could have little bitty books and they could be making money all day, all the time if they already have an audience.
Right. So as far as realistic expectations, you mentioned this earlier in other parts of our series. Do not quit your job.
No, don't.
Don't quit your job.
You need your job to fund the time you're spending in building your book platform.
Yeah, right.
And having your book and promoting your book. Just because it's done, and I'm telling you, the first time they said this, I went to the St. Louis Publishers Association meeting, and they said, well, writing your book and completing it is only 5%. And I was like, what are they talking about? Well, now 25 books later, it is the truth. Yeah. Okay. You can have a great book sitting on the shelf. And I personally think some of the people I've worked with have outstanding books. But if nobody knows about them, then it is very difficult. And you have to buy those books. And you made a great point in another video about people having, if you want a radio personality or you want someone else to, or a newspaper, they usually want a copy of your book. So guess what? You're paying for that. You're giving away. You can expect you need to give away about 50 to 100 books. If those books are costing you $5 a piece, let's just say they are, let alone they might be costing you $8. Do you see how that adds up already?
Right.
Now I'm going to say, if I send my book to Tony Scott, okay, and Tony sees my book and he loves it and he does a video and he says, this is Tony Scott and I love this and such and such, such and such, and Tony Scott is reaching 50,000 people around the world, then that was worth that $800 that I spent to send it to all these other people, because Tony Scott helped me to get exposure and got me bookings or got me whatever. But a lot of times it's very difficult for us to have those type of things. And just because you have a video doesn't mean it's going to take some action and have somebody come out of pocket.
Okay. So you're going to choose the right publisher. What are some basic things you need to know about a publisher? One, I guess the first thing would be is they're not in it for you. They're in it for them. So you need to understand that.
Yeah, I mean, it's business. So you have to align yourself with the values of the people you're working with. So, for example, for me and my company, you know, Absolute Good Training and Life Skills Management, I started the publishing arm, Mission Possible Press, and then now Aspiration Publishing, because I wanted to help people communicate their message. That's what I do. I'm a communication strategist. It just happens to be I'm focusing on publishing sometimes. Okay, so it's not for me. Publishing for me is about helping to spread messages around the world which will help people to live better lives. Those are the types of books I publish. Where you have Hay House, Louise Hay. She has books similar to that, but she has other types of books that talk about metaphysical studies and things like that. You have different publishers who do different things. So you have to make sure, if you are in the math industry, or if you are in the self-help category, or if you are in fiction, you want to find a publisher who publishes the types of books you write. Okay, because hopefully they're going to have some resources in order to be able to give you some publicity and things like that. For me, I typically work with people who they might be a one-book wonder, or they may want to start a writing career over a span of time. My personal goal without publishing their book is to inform and educate potential authors on what it takes to be a successful author. Once you have that information, now you can say, this publisher publishes horror books, and they're graphic by nature. And I would never read those books. So I don't know if I want to work with those people. Right. So you have to choose that. And the other thing is, there are publishing companies online, and I won't name any of them, but a lot of those are like a copy shop. Okay? So if you know you want it to be your best book, you need to make sure that you're either paying up front or that you're investing with your publisher, through your publisher, so that they can use their editorial services, those things, to make it the very best book, because you can't do it on your own. Okay.
So you don't go to Taco Bell for a lobster dinner. So you got to know what you're doing as far as working with the right publisher. Now, when you do this publishing venture, it does need to be understood, and you mentioned this about grinding it out. You're going to put in most of the work.
Yes.
That's it, really. Just you are going to put in most of the work. Simply put, be ready to grind, because the fruits of your labor will only be as a result of your grind, not a publishing company's grind if you sign with one or whatever. It's going to be your grind. I mean, there are exceptions. Like I said, there are people who are on a whole nother level, but we're talking about you and your first book.
Absolutely.
Okay. In our next segment, we're going to talk about promotion and publicity, time, money, and resources. So we'll do that in our final segment of getting you self-publishing what you need to know. That's Lena Johnson. Check her out at jolenajohnson.com. I'm Tony Scott. Thanks for watching Talking 360.